Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kinakina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hiaka ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora. This is the final session in our three-part Clarity of Learning focus and also the final introductory AfL webinar for 2024. The previous two Clarity webinars have provided a strategy to answer the questions of where am I going, where am I now, and today's session will provide a strategy to answer the question, what are my next steps? This webinar is focused on how you can begin to use student goal setting as a powerful tool for assessment for learning and to provide clarity and ownership of learning for all of our ākonga. Student goal setting is consistently ranked as one of the highest impact teaching strategies for improving positive student outcomes and is a key skill for lifelong learning, metacognition, as well as social and emotional learning. We have an increasingly diverse range of abilities, emotions, strengths, challenges, prior knowledge, and experience within our classes. One learning goal will only set the appropriate challenge for a small number of students in our class, which is why it is so important to teach our tamariki how to set their own learning goals as early as we can. This strategy is particularly useful for ākonga working at the higher end of the range in our classes, but does provide motivation to all of our learners and also is a tool for differentiating learning that puts the control more in the students' hands. We will look at a generic success criteria for student goal setting that will be shown across the phases and a range of learning areas. The reason why student goal setting is so important is for four main reasons. One is that it enhances motivation. When students set goals, they feel ownership of their own learning journey. Number two is that it builds confidence. Achieving goals helps tamariki to see what they're capable of. Number three is it develops lifelong learning skills. Goal setting fosters critical thinking, planning, and perseverance. And the final one is that it aligns with the New Zealand curriculum values, encouraging learners to be confident, connected, and actively involved. Student goal setting touches on all five aspects of assessment for learning. Number one, without clear learning intentions and success criteria being shared, unpacked, and discussed, ākonga will not have a framework from which to set goals, so clarity is key. The second area of engineering effective discussions, tasks, and activities that elicit evidence of learning. If you don't create these opportunities for you and your students, they'll not be able to identify their strengths and areas for growth from which to set the goals. The third area, providing feedback on their learning from the teacher, their peers, and themselves, helps them to identify the goal that best fits their needs and that's within their zone of proximal development. Assessment-capable students can also provide better information to teachers. Better student feedback gives teachers a clearer picture of students' learning needs and enables more personalised development of the next teaching and learning steps. The fourth area of activating students as learning resources for one another, where facilitated activities allow students to constantly discuss their learning. This allows a better understanding of theirs and other students' needs. And finally, activating students as owners of their own learning. All of the above allow them to be in control of and own their own learning, which is the focus of today's webinar. I've chosen this whakatauki because I think it aligns nicely with the focus of student goal setting. Ko te pua waitanga o ngā moe moea me whakamahi. Dreams become a reality when we take action. So the setting of goals in itself isn't the only thing we'll be discussing today. We'll actually be talking about how important it is to make an action plan and to check in regularly and also to celebrate success. So our success criteria today for teaching students how to set, track, and achieve learning goals has 5 key areas. On the success criteria here, it's broken down into 7 steps. I'm just going to briefly go through the 5 main areas that make up these 7 steps. So we need to make sure that we set specific goals with the students using the SMART framework. Some people love this, some people are not a fan. I think we all know what the SMART framework stands for. Just recap in case you don't. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. There is a lot of research to say, especially if you're not a goal setting expert, that actually sticking to SMART goals as a gateway into goal setting is actually a really powerful technique. The second thing is encouraging student voice. So goals should always resonate with students' interests and aspirations, and hopefully the motivation's been provided for them by explaining why they're learning what they're learning to allow them to have the desire to achieve the goals in the learning area that you've got the focus on. Breaking it down is really important too. So teaching students to set small, actionable steps is key. Monitoring progress is also really important. So you can use visual trackers, regular check-ins, scaffold for them, recording and monitoring their goals. It's really important that you don't forget that you've set a goal and then never go back to it. And the fifth thing is to celebrate success. It's really important to acknowledge big and small achievements and not necessarily just the end point. So the success criteria I've got here, the first thing you need to do is identify the area you would like students to set a goal in. And alongside here, I've used an example for maths. There's another 3 examples to follow, but I felt today particularly it was important to see it alongside the actual success criteria. So I've just chosen number knowledge as a generic area of the curriculum that you could focus on. Number 2, as we've seen in the teacher-only days that we've had around rubrics and the previous webinar, that a rubric is really important for guiding student learning and allowing students to self-assess where they are in their learning. So you would also need to have a rubric or at least a success criteria so students can see where they are now. I would provide for this one in the example a number and patterns rubric. So time needs to be spent on supporting students to identify where they are in their learning at the moment, and that could be with them looking at previous work they've done or just actually the knowledge they've got of what they can do at the moment. So for example, I've put for step number 3, the student identify their next step is to skip count in 3s. Number 4 is to set a SMART goal. And my example is, I will be able to skip count in 3s by the end of week 3. And you can see how that's a SMART goal because it's specific. So it's the skip counting in 3s. It's measurable. They'll know whether they can or can't do it. It's achievable because the students have identified that's where they are. It's relevant or realistic, and it's also got a time frame. The next thing is to make a plan for achieving the goal. So setting the goal itself is not going to mean that they're going to do it. So for number 5, I have got 2 action steps here. So the first thing the student's going to do is use a number line to count on in 3s this week for 5 minutes every day. So they would need to work out exactly when they're going to do that. And B is to practice skip counting at home after tea every night. Number 6 is to schedule time to check the progress during class. And this is your responsibility as a teacher to actually put time aside to do this. And for number 6 here, the student has decided they're going to buddy up with someone to see how they're going with their goal and discuss that. And you may need to teach them how to do this and give them a framework for discussing their goal and the action and how they're going. Number 7, celebrate progress in the action plan. And so you might co-construct something with your class, depending on their age, on what would be a good way to celebrate success for those people that have managed to achieve their goal or work towards them at least. So the second example I've got here, and I've copied and pasted an abbreviated version of the success criteria in the yellow on the left-hand side. So this example is looking at a learning to learn. So the skills are in a rubric here that I'm looking to develop in my students and hoping they can set some goals around. So the 3 skills are talking about their learning, asking for help, and giving feedback to others. So the student here has used tickle pink and green for growth to identify what they can currently do repeatedly and what they want to work on in their next steps. They've set a SMART goal and an action plan, which is I will find out why we are learning things in Te Reo by asking 3 friends before I ask Whaiapati, so I can explain this when asked. So the specificity is in the fact that they can't at the moment explain why they're learning what they're learning. And they're combining that with not always going to the teacher to ask first, so talking to others to be able to explain the first part. And then they haven't actually put this into their goal at the moment, and that's fine because they don't want to have that as a focus. But if they wanted to, they could also look at the providing more detail and feedback to other people. So number 6, scheduling check-ins. Pati has decided that every Wednesday after lunch is going to be their goal setting check-in. And if people are taking action on their goals, then they're going to get free time on a Friday before they pack up. So another example in this one is from the social sciences curriculum, Te Ao Tangata, and it's for phase 1 learners, so years 1 to 3, and it's about retelling stories from the past. So there's a visual representation of a rubric here. We've got the kākano, the tipu, and the rākau in picture form for our younger learners who are maybe not able to read yet. They've identified where they are at the moment. I've actually used a combination of tickle, pink, and green for growth. I'm a big fan of students learning that process right from year 1 on new entrant classes. They can all use a highlighter, and if they're taught really early on, then that's something they carry through with them right through school. You could also use stickers, emoticon stickers, so they could put or draw a smiley face on where they know that they are working at the moment. And I've drawn an arrow to represent where they're going to next. So this student will verbally share, because they can't write at the moment, that I will listen carefully and recall where and when the story happened. I will tell Jimmy after every story this week. So with our younger learners, you probably want to make the time frame a bit shorter. And so it may even be a daily goal, or maybe if they're more practiced, it could be a weekly goal. The check-in time is going to be Friday mornings after wāwhānau, and then if they have all worked towards their goal, they're going to have a class dance party on Monday morning. So that's a celebration aspect. And the final example I've got here is for a phase 3 visual arts and looking at drawing in creating a visual arts piece in the style of an artist that the students choose themselves. So we've identified the area of visual arts. I've got a rubric here, which is only part of a rubric, where they've got to focus on information about the artist, the style of the artist, and actually creating something themselves. So again, we've used the tickle, pink, and green for growth as the self-assessment. This may be new learning to them, or it might be something they're already working on, so they can show evidence of why they've put themselves where they have. This student's created a SMART goal of, I will find out who influenced Colin McKeon and what materials and colours he used and his style by the end of week 8 by researching on the internet on Monday and Friday after lunch. I will start to create some sketches in his style at the same time. So their scheduled check-in is going to be with their art teacher. My art teacher at school, my secondary school, was my favourite teacher. She was called Mrs. Skinner. So she's checking in with Mrs. Skinner on a Monday and with her friend Kāhui on a Wednesday. And her celebration will literally be the discussion she has to celebrate the movement she's made in her goal setting and action plan with the teacher and the friend. So I've got some quite specific enablers and barriers for goal setting. Enablers are, if you start small and achievable, you're more likely as a teacher, if you don't do this already, and as students, you want to get some success. So start in an area of the curriculum that you're quite confident in, and one that you definitely have some resources already made, or it's not going to be too difficult to create the rubrics that students need to set their goals. So you do need to provide a rubric or a success criteria for students to actually guide what their goals are going to be around. And as per the last webinar that we did, it's really good to try and provide examples of what good looks like rather than just the rubric itself. So then students are more able to confidently and accurately self-assess what their next steps are. Some students will need scaffolding, so you might actually give them some goals to choose from. It's always nice if you can include some choice, but some students won't be able to create their own goals, so it would be good to help support them to do that. Again, really important reminder just to schedule time to go back to the goals. There's no point in doing goal setting with students if you're not going to go back to them. As we know, we set our own goals, and if we don't revisit them and check in on them, we're less likely to achieve them. Again, celebrating progress is an enabler because it gives students that, the positive affirmation they need to show that they are developing and growing as learners. And another good enabler is to involve whānau. So maybe just communicating home that you're goal setting in class and asking them to ask their students what their goals are in their learning. Barriers, as always, giving up after the first go. Goal setting's not an easy thing to do, and nothing that's worth doing usually is. So do try and persevere. And if you do it as a whole school, that's also really powerful, because you've got that accountability check-in and you can get some tips and tricks from other teachers in your school. Again, just to repeat, but the flip side, if you don't revisit the goals once they've been set, they're quite meaningless. Try not to make the goals too broad or challenging, and the SMART acronym helps with that. And any reverse of the enablers is going to be a barrier too. If anyone's got any questions, then feel free to get in touch. Now would be a good time to set with a buddy or with all of your teachers in your school how you're going to learn this, and pre-planning is absolutely key here, and scheduling time yourself. So this webinar actually is sort of like, you're going to do what you want the students to do too. So what is going to be your goal around goal setting with your students? When are you going to have regular check-ins, and how are you going to celebrate success? So we'll finish with our karakia. So last webinar of 2024. Look forward to seeing you guys in 2025, and where we've got a focus on students as resources for each other, looking at how we can effectively use authentic cooperative learning in class. Inuia, inuia, inuia ki te uru tapanui, kia wātea, kia māma, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua, ki te aratangata. Koia rā e rongo. Whakairehia ake ki runga. Kia tina, tina, hui e, tae ki e.